There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. That memorable quote attributed to Lenin is perhaps appropriate for the times we live in now. Donald Trump has completed a month in office in his second term. But Trump 2.0's first few weeks have seen unprecedented action and disruption. A slew of executive orders by the American president, official statements and off-the-cuff remarks have kept the United States and much of the world, including here in India, on the edge. What will Trump 2.0 do next is the biggest X factor that's almost now become a daily debate. How should the world see Donald Trump's second coming? And what does it mean for the world order? These are some of the questions we will be exploring on a very special global roundtable here on India Today. I'm joined by special guests from across the world in a true sense, a global roundtable. Jeremy Issacharoff is former Vice DG in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Israel. Appreciate your joining us. Richard Russo is Senior Advisor, Center for Strategic and International Studies. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Professor Sari Hanafi is Director, American University, Beirut. Tinatin Aklevidyani is Research Fellow she's at the EU Foreign Policy Unit. She joins us there. Zachary Paikin, Deputy Director, will also be joining us later in the show. And Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, former Secretary MEA, is with us. And Andrew K.P. Leung, China strategist, is joining us from Hong Kong. And as I said, we're traveling across the globe today on the Global Roundtable. The big question, is Donald Trump simply the biggest disruptor to hit the world in the last 75 years, since World War II, some would say? I want to go to all our panelists, starting with you, Mr. Russo, there in America. Is he, in your view, simply the biggest disruptor, given what we've seen in the last few weeks?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I've been in Washington for almost 30 years and never seen anything quite like this out of the gates. We look at some of the major changes that we've seen in our relationships, and some of that echoes things that we saw the last time that he was in office, the challenges to our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, concerns about immigration, but the quick snap that you've seen on Russia. But, you know, the bigger thing, I think, is the changes that we've seen here in Washington on gutting federal agencies, a lot of the career diplomats and bureaucrats that we've seen that actually lead day-to-day a lot of our engagement with the world are gone. Not just the career folks, not just the political appointees, but a lot of career folks. So I think the things that you see in the flash and the news and the changes, the direction, the foreign policy is one thing, but we're losing the machinery here right now. And we don't know yet what the plan is to rebuild that and bring it back again. USAID, of course, but a lot of career folks at State Department. So a huge disruption, not seen anything like it, certainly not even in Trump's first term.
Just to press you on that, are you therefore suggesting that what we're seeing is essentially a one-man show? We, of course, hear the Elon Musks of the world on Twitter making their own comments about the world. But is this essentially now the complete personalization of foreign policy in the hands of Donald Trump?
Well, I think they sat 4 years out of office and were planning for this day. They knew the entire time they had a reasonably good chance of coming back to office. So a lot of planning had been happening during that period. So they didn't come in carte blanche, and a lot of people have access to President Trump during that period. But, you know, at the end of the day, you look back at the last administration and you think of the most important positions, your chief of staff, your national security advisor, the secretary of defense. They went through people at an amazing rate last time around. So those that we think have influence, maybe that's true for a few minutes. But last time he was in office, you saw a tremendous level of churn of a lot of cabinet and senior people inside the White House. So I do believe folks like Elon Musk, you see him every day, a lot of access, a lot of visibility, a lot of influence. But we'll see whether or not they remain, because last time it was a very short tenure for people that had that kind of access and influence with the president.
Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, your former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, from an Indian perspective, have you seen anything quite like what we're seeing in the last few weeks? Every day throws up a new headline with Donald Trump throwing up numbers about reciprocal tariffs, then suggesting that there were amounts paid across the world to destabilize governments by US aids. Have we seen anything like this? Have you seen in your long experience anyone quite like Donald Trump?
Well, not really. And I think he's quite unique in his own way. But let's not forget that his domestic disruption is far more overwhelming than what he's trying to do internationally. And I think our friend from the US just also referred to that. Now, US aid, let me say that US aid has been functioning in India for a very long time. And we do know what they fund and who they fund. And that is not, these are open funding arrangements. But behind the scenes, there are also, I would say, the political agenda of the government that funds it. That's very natural, because if the man who pays the piper calls the tune. So that has always been the case in international politics. But I think what we are seeing today is certainly a throwback to the appeasement of the far right conservative sections of the US. But let me end by saying that while Trump may try to do all these things, let us not forget there will be pushback. I know of many diplomats in the Trump 1.0 who resigned. They were my friends. They said, so when I asked them, why are you quitting? They said, look, we can't just work with this guy anymore. So I think there is a lot of domestic pushback going to happen. There are many things that Trump is overstretching and crossing the Rubicon in terms of, let's say, trade deals, etc., because he's trying to bypass the Congress. But I don't know how much the Congress will fight back. But certainly he's trying to appease the section which has brought him into power. But there is a very large section which are very, very apprehensive and angry about what he's doing. So even in the domestics, there will be, and then of course the courts are.
So you're saying there will be some. I'm going to stop you for a moment. You're saying you could see some kind of pushback, but let's focus on the moment now, because what we are seeing, Dr. Tinatin Akhlevadyani, research fellow at the Center for European Policy Studies, is Trump seems to want to completely remap the world order. The old world order post-World War II, based essentially on rules, multilateral commitments, being replaced by military and economic might, almost sort of even Europe, long-standing ally, being pushed to the margins, Trump directly dealing with Russia when it comes to Ukraine. Are we seeing a complete disruption, particularly where you are in Europe at the moment?
Indeed, this is, I think, a very good and correct description of what's going on now. I mean, obviously, Europe and European Union and its like-minded countries feel very much abandoned by Trump's change of mind. These are the talks that he's having in Saudi Arabia with Putin, not in Europe, because the war is currently raging in the European continent, not in Kiev, because this is the capital of the country, which was actually invaded. And as you rightly pointed out, this is the violation of the international law and the rules-based order. So there is quite high stakes, quite high, and the EU is currently, quite shocked with that, and we see all this contemplation on how to fill the gaps if the Trump continues to throw Ukraine under the bus, and in fact, very much echo what Kremlin wants to see and wants to hear about that.
Is it much the same mood at the moment in the Middle East? Jeremy Ishasharov, your former Vice Director General at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, former Head Multilateral Affairs Directorate, Israel. How does Israel see it? Benjamin Netanyahu was among the first world leaders to meet Donald Trump and hailed him for his initiatives in the Middle East. Is there a very different perspective there in the Middle East to what it is in Europe at the moment? Is Donald Trump someone whom Israel believes is the right man at the right place?
Well, first of all, I would defer to my American and my European colleagues on what they've said about the impact of the Trump presidency on internal American affairs and on Europe. Regarding the Middle East, I think the situation is a little more complicated. As you know, we are in the middle of implementing the hostage deal, the first stage of the hostage deal, which has been a very traumatic experience for Israel, particularly yesterday after the receipt of 4 bodies, 3 of which only were classified as being Israelis, and it's been a very difficult time. But one of the things that Trump has said that he wants, and he's put pressure on implementing the hostage deal, which also means ending the war. And there's a great deal of support within Israel for that approach. The other idea he's come up with is turning Gaza into a Riviera, which, frankly, personally, I'm sure Mr. Netanyahu found a positivity in that idea. I find less, and I think it's very difficult to see how it could actually be implemented on the ground and if it's at all desirable. But one thing I would say is that his ideas have actually spurned the Arab countries to start thinking about alternative solutions. There have been discussions in Saudi Arabia, I think today. There will be discussions in Egypt coming up with ideas, ultimately, which would emphasize the idea of implementing the two-state solution. So I think that if Mr. Trump wants to help the parties come to some sort of agreement, we should revisit the idea of a two-state solution. Now, the last thing I want to say, I think the cutting the USAID will have an impact on the Middle East, on the Palestinian territories, and also cutting aid to the Palestinian security forces also is a negative idea. So these are the things. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but It's still early to judge.
It's a bit of a mixed bag there as far as the Middle East is concerned. Very different views coming in for Europe. Before I come to you, Professor Hanafi, let me just play what Donald Trump said on Gaza. It's one of those off-the-cuff remarks that he tends to make that immediately attract attention and controversy. That's the kind of person he is. Listen in to what he said, and then I'll get you to respond.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings. And I don't want to be cute, I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad, this could be so magnificent.
Peace between Israel.
Professor Sari Hanafi there in Beirut. Here is Donald Trump talking about a French Riviera like Gaza. I mean, these are the kind of remarks that he's making, which is obviously sending various kinds of shockwaves in some parts of the world.
Yeah, actually, we will able to talk to each other from India, from Israel, from US, because we have a common language. This common language come from international relation, from humanitarian and international laws. And Mr. Trump is absolutely violate all level of this universalistic language. What is going on Gaza is a genocide according to major international human rights organizations. So he is not talking about genocide. He is talking just to take the hostage. Actually, on Israel, it has 100,000 of Palestinian hostage. It's a colonial state in West Bank and Gaza. All this is,
so are you saying the Arab world cannot trust Donald Trump? Are you telling me the Arab world will simply not trust Arab world?
I am worried on the level of racism, of Islamophobia, of denying basic vocabulary of international law. According to the international law, Israel is an occupied forces in Palestinian territories. So he is not talking neither to one-state solution nor to two-state solutions. He think about as a businessman who, as a real estate developer, is really in the Arab world. We see Trump is absolutely not only violating a basic right for the Palestinians, but also really is violating all levels.
So you believe Trump is going against? I take your point that you believe Donald Trump is going against. You believe the basic principles of humanity and the universal principles of human rights.